Hey, Eddie Inzauto, GamerNode.com, and today I'm taking a look at a game that's going to be hitting Kickstarter either late October or at some point during November. And this is Hunting Sasquatch from Spyglass Games, designed by Jeff Arbough. It's a competitive push-your-luck dice rolling game. It reminds me a lot of Elder Sign, and you'll see why. So here's an example of some of the art from the game, and you'll see some more in the location and hunter cards. This is an early rule book. It's pretty extensive. There's a lot in there, but for now we're going to set that aside. So the way that this game is played is each player takes a hunter card, and everyone is going to be hunting Sasquatch and competing to get the most points by being, quote, victorious in the various locations, earning some of these evidence markers, and also getting the points that are listed here. So on a turn, say I'm the conspiracy theorist and I go first, I'm going to flip one of the locations. There's a different number of locations that are allowed to be out depending on player count. For a two-player game, it's 2. So in this case, I'd flip my first location, and once you flip a location, you have to go to that location and attempt the victory conditions in that location. If there are already multiple locations out, you can choose one of the ones that are already available. Otherwise, you choose to flip and you have to go there. And the reason that's a risk is because each hunter card has this doomed word down here. It's just color-coded. So this would be if this sort of gunmetal gray doomed icon came up on the bottom of a location card. And in this case, we're safe. So what you do is you declare you're going to a location, you then roll your hunter dice, and each character has a different special ability as well, and when that comes into play, we'll show you. So once you've rolled your hunter dice, you first see if you satisfy the death condition, which in this case we don't. If you survive that, you then move on to the victory condition. And now we have a bunch of unused dice. So normally, you would roll this fate die, and the fate die says either you get the trap, it's a 50-50 chance, or you get to roll again. So you only get one reroll by doing that. In this case, the conspiracy theorist lets us reroll the hunter dice without rolling the fate die. So here we would roll them all. Once you've chosen your initial roll, you can choose to roll all 8 of the hunter dice on your first roll or any number fewer than that. But once you've chosen that number, your second roll has to be exactly the number that were not used previously. So in this case, we would get 2 more of these magnifying glasses, and we did not satisfy the reward. So in that case, we pull the dice, we pass them over to the next player, take our character back, and continue. Now, if we were to have died, if this was the... Oh, in this we did die, actually. So we did die. Before I was able to put that magnifying glass, we died. So in that case, the conspiracy theorist goes away in the discard pile. That's the first of 6 in a 2-player game. Once you hit 6 dead hunters, the game ends and you go to scoring. In higher player count games, that number goes up. And now we've pulled the big game hunters, and this has a different special ability that's a little bit more active. Once per turn, you can flip a hunter die to a gun, which I think is pretty cool. So if we would have succeeded here, though, we would get all those magnifying glasses. Then the dice are removed. We take the little photograph evidence, and we take this card completely into our hand. So now this is what identifies that we have 6 victory points for the end of the game. And at the end of the game, you add up your victory points. Each piece of evidence is worth 2, and you can only have 1 of each type of evidence. And in the case of a tie, the player with the most unique evidence markers gets the victory. You also have these anti-tokens, where if on your initial roll you have an anti-token in your possession, you have to apply its effects first. So in this case, we would eliminate this die completely from this round of play. Then you also have something called the wild card, and say I wanted to get an additional magnifying glass, I would use that, spend that. Then we have this reroll token. In that case, we automatically get to reroll without going to the fate die. So that's how that works. Then we move on. The next player draws. See, in this case, the magician begins with 2 of those to start, 2 wild cards. And it's just the same thing. I always roll all 8 dice, just because it seems like that's the only reasonable thing to do. And what do we have here? So we've gotten nowhere. We can use these 2, if we wanted to, as the magician, to make them exactly what we want. We want another camera and another footprint. Boom, we've succeeded. However, something that I failed to notice is that once this card came out, because this gray matched the gray on the magician card, the magician was doomed here. They would have died. So that would have killed our magician before we even got to roll. If you have multiple locations up like this, obviously you choose which one you want to go to. These big game hunters would not go where they're doomed. They would go somewhere else. Or they would draw something new, and then they would have to go there. And you cover up whichever pile has the fewest. And if they're equal, you choose. And that's really the whole game. So that's Hunting Sasquatch. It's a sort of push your luck game. I think there's a little bit less push in this push your luck game because you're only re-rolling 1 time. You have this fate die. You know it's always a 50-50 chance. I guess you're pushing your luck to get that re-roll, because otherwise, if you don't succeed, say you got one of those deaths and one of those, and you don't want to re-roll your dice, you can just say, okay, your turn. But the thing is, these traps, they give you an anti-token, but that only applies for the first time you roll that. So it's not like you're really missing out. It's either you don't get anything because you didn't succeed and you pass to the other player, or you give yourself the chance to get these points and this evidence token, or the chance to get the trap. So I find that people almost always roll the fate die because the trap is never so horrible and it never takes away points from you. You know, in something like even the old Farkle, or where you're just rolling regular 6-sided dice for points, if you have some points stored up and you choose to keep rolling, you can lose them all, or you can gain more, or, you know, in anything like that. Zombie dice, you know, you're trying to get those successes, the brains on the zombie dice, and you have them set aside. So if I have 3 of those set aside and I keep rolling, I'm risking losing those 3. Here you're not really risking losing anything you have, you're just risking getting a penalty. Otherwise, I think it's a cool little game. It's a nice concept. I really like this art, and I think the idea of all these different hunters with different abilities, they don't have a ton of them with final art yet, so they have a few repeats. This is their placeholder art, but there are a lot of different abilities. You have all these cards, and I think it's pretty neat. I think it's worth checking out. They're going to be on Kickstarter in November or at the end of October. So that's Hunting Sasquatch. It's from Spyglass Games, and it's going to be hitting Kickstarter very soon. I don't have any details on the expected price. I would personally hope for a sub $20 price tag. You know, you can get zombie dice for $10. This does have a lot more stuff going on. However, the gameplay is something I worry about. The complexity of gameplay is such that it corresponds to a more low dollar value game, whereas its complexity of components is likely to drive that price up a little bit. But again, this is speculation. I'm not sure of the exact pricing planned for the Kickstarter. We'll keep an eye out for you and let you know exactly when this Kickstarter hits, so you can go check it out in all its glory, see all the details, and figure out if you want to back or not. Hopefully this helped you get an idea of what the game is. A fun little competitive push-your-luck dice game. Really quick. It says 30 minutes, but you can go much faster than that. I mean, especially with fewer players. Up to 5 players, I guess you'd more likely hit that 30-minute mark. So this is Eddie Inzauto. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.